teachers of Reddit, what amusing family secrets did you accidentally learn from your overly talkative students? Kudos going out to all the teachers for glossing over the home stuff they learn. My sister wrote in her daily journal in grade 1 that our parents had a shower together the night before. Teacher wrote, what a great way to save water. My daughter's kindergarten teacher told me about how one child entertained the mad show and tell with a complete report on the new alarm system in their house, including the code and where the keypad was located behind the curtains. Here's a cute and light-hearted one. I had a girl stay for some help after school one day. At the time I was teaching geometry, 10th grade, in a mostly Hispanic school. She told me about growing up in Peru until about the age of 10 or so. I can't remember the exact age she told me. She was telling me that she worked with her uncle sometimes on the weekend. I asked what kind of work. Many of our kids worked construction with their families. He's a clown. I'm his DJ. That really gave me a smile. 4th grade. A student on Zoom the other day asked why another student had been gone a few weeks, and we all heard his mom in the back yell, "Boy, that is Nana Yodam business," before he muted. I almost burst laughing, but I held my composure. Worked at an after-school program run by the IMCA. Once had a 4th grader explain to me in detail how her sister was also her cousin. Edit. They had the same dad and their moms were sisters. So half siblings through dad and first cousins through moms. Having a 9-year-old run you through that is quite a trip. An 11th grader was talking about how he moved back with his grandparents when his mom dies. He mentioned that his mom also attended this school and so did his dad, but he never met him. He only knew his dad's first name. So he says the name in my get to know other students first day icebreaker. A freshman girl asked a few pointed questions, pulls out her phone and calls their dad. Dad is there within 15 minutes. Turns out the dead mom's family moved mom out of the city to hide the pregnancy and the dad only knew the child's first name. Dad spent years trying unsuccessfully to track his kid down. The dad settled down, becomes a EMT, gets married, has 3 daughters. The oldest daughter was the freshman. There was a GD family reunion in my icebreaker on the first day of school. Okay, so not a teacher, but in grade 9 there was a girl who got completely plastered in the girls' bathroom, and my 14-year-old self had one too many slushies at lunch, so I ran into her there. This girl's makeup was a complete mess, and since I was at the peak of social anxiety problems I just tried to slip away. As usual I was too late and this girl clung to my arm and fell apart sobbing to me about how her boyfriend had gotten her mother pregnant. I ended up missing the rest of the day to sit in the corner of the bathroom with this girl I had never met before in my life, and we never talked again. But man, I feel bad for that dysfunction family. Things have been pretty depressing recently, so here's a funny one. A kid in one of my classes told me that they learned that Santa isn't real, and in fact, it's actually their parents eating the milk and cookies. But, as they said, it's not right, they have to make the milk and cookies and eat it. They cook for me and I eat it, so I learned how to make cookies and pour milk now. So wholesome. They told me they have a younger sibling, and they're going to keep making milk and cookies for Santa until their sibling gets older and they'll teach them how to do it too. 8th grader, excitedly, MRS, Rosita Kidoki. Guess what I found out? My grandpa was an artsy. Me. Do you know what an artsy is? 8th grader, no, me. Maybe you should go talk to your mom about that. She came in the next day and went, yeah, my mom told me I can't tell people about my grandpa anymore. 8th grader, I'm really concerned about this. It was my own child actually. My husband had just quit smoking and my daughter was in kindergarten, had proceeded to go and tell everybody that her father had quit doing drugs. Tobacco equals drugs. I had quite a number of co-workers and parents come asking me if everything was okay at home. A cop came to my daughter's class in kindergarten and told all the kids smoking and drinking was doing drugs. Technically correct. But my daughter went around telling everyone we did drugs and cried her eyes out on New Year's when we had champagne. I often wonder how many other people she told her parents are drug addicts. I used to do science programming for kids. In the middle of a library summer reading program, I picked a little girl, probably about 4-5 years old, to come up and be my volunteer for a magic trick, which then you explained the science of after it was done. I asked what her name was. She said it into the mic. Zero shyness in front of approximately 200 kids and adults. I asked if she had ever heard of the trick we were going to do and she said, nope. My favorite dinosaur is a triceratops, and I like your shoes. My dad is back there. Hi dad, but my mom couldn't come tonight because she got a shot in her butt and can't sit on the hard chairs this place has. Dad, and all the other adults in the audience, were dying. One of my students once said mummy wants to know if you want to come round 40 because daddy is away at work. The mother couldn't look at me for weeks on the playground, cause I think she heard her daughter ask me. I had a Japanese student whose family had formed a music band that practiced in their basement routinely. Unfortunately, I did not get to witness this awesomeness. I did a placement once and students had to talk about what they would do with $1 million. One kid gets up in front of the class and goes, my mum said if she had $1 million, she would buy lots and lots and lots and lots of weed. That their mom eats sugar with her nose. I had a kid bring candy from his dad doesn't drink any more meetings. I have a kindergartner whose dad died about a year ago. She doesn't quite understand where he went, so sometimes when other kids bring up their dad she talks about him. A couple times she said she misses him and says he's on a trip. Sometimes she says he's coming home tomorrow. I only met her mom once so I don't know the situation, but I don't blame her for not knowing how to explain death to a 5-year-old. Sorry, I know that's sad, but I work in a low-income area. I have lots of sad stories. I don't think this is a secret, but as I was waiting for the class to start, I sat at the back and this girl turned to me and started telling me about how her mom fell on her ray while she was in the shower and hadn't showered for days after the injury because she couldn't do it. 2 girls in middle school were next door neighbors and always marveled about how much they looked alike. While I taught 4th grade, I had a kid tell me that his dad works on car rims at night. Another one told my friend, the bilingual teacher, that she came back from visiting family in Mexico over the weekend by going through the river. Edited to at another one. I taught the son of a 2nd grade teacher. He came in one weekend talking about drinking lots of kid beer over the weekend at his dad's house. His mom stopped by later and I mentioned the story. She shook her head and said, it's apple juice. I keep telling his dad to stop calling it kid beer. Thanks for the awards. These are my very first ones. We were talking about calling 911, but what a real emergency is. This is tricky with 10-year-olds because you want to use real emergency examples but not freak them out. One kid. So if your mom gives birth in the kitchen, that's an emergency. Sure enough, mom picks him up with his baby brother who was born last week in the kitchen. I wasn't a teacher, but I used to have a small farm with the usual farm animals. I also went to schools and brought along animals and educated the class on animal care, etc. I always invited elementary school classes to come take a tour of the farm and entertain the children. Every year the teachers took me up on the offer. At the time I also had several animals up in the house, including a few squirrel monkeys. One of them was really old and she had no teeth. A young boy in the 2nd grade was laughing and playing with that older monkey while I talked to the class that surrounded the monkey cages. The old monkey was gumming his finger and he couldn't stop laughing. Finally the little boy said, hey Jacob, come here and let her bite you, it feels just like grandma. And while showing them the possum I was bottle feeding back to health, a little boy said he had a bunch of them in his bedroom closet. Not me, but my husband has a student whose mom has a massive crush on him. She tells him all the time about how her mom primps before they do anything online, so she can lean in and say hi to him. I was walking a new student to it and they happily shared the story of his fat cousin who is wanted by the sheriff because he's behind in his child support. The fat cousin is fat because he drinks energy drinks and not water, and he doesn't pay child support because he doesn't like kids. Fat cousin also smells a bit like cheese and his feet have long toenails, and so on and so forth until we arrived at the head office. Used to teach pre-kindergarten. I had one kid who would tell me every month when her mom was on her period. MRS. My mom is bleeding from her butt again. At least, I hope that is what was going on, or that poor lady had some severe hemorrhoids. If someone in your family is pregnant, and you've told your child, I already know. I once had a student explain to me that all his neighbors were mad at his dad. I asked him why. Kid goes on to tell me his dad had started a fire for insurance money and lit the whole carport on fire. Many cars were lit on fire that night. Kids. Special education teacher here. I had a student who was an absolute terror. He bullied the other students and constantly disrupted lessons. His mother was just as bad. She would routinely stop by to visit my classroom and would sit there and give me the stank eye. Then she would go to the principal with made up stories of my inability to teach and all my bias against her son. She would call meetings with district level administrators and rail against me for hours. One day I was asking my students if they could write down their address for a class project we were doing. The terror gives me an address that is different from the one we had on record. In fact, the address was in the next town 15 miles away. He and his mother had moved 9 months earlier, but had neglected to register in their new school district, as is required. I notified my principal and the next day the terror is gone. The icing on the cake was that terror mom was sued by our school district for the loss of funds during that 9-month period. Not a teacher, but the parent. When my, now teenage, daughter was young, I had a roommate who smoked pot before it was legal here. One time they left out their bowl and my child saw it and decided to draw it for art class the next day. Needless to say, the conversation with the teacher was interesting the next day. My kids' teachers used to say, "I won't believe everything your kid tells me about home." If you don't believe everything they say happened at school, basically call and check first before you go to the principal or call the police. Kids do say the darndest things.